The thing I wanted to talk about is actually this paper that came out from Apple last week. This is an academic research paper that came from Apple's research division that talks about the limited reasoning abilities of AI. It's called The Illusion of Thinking: Understanding the Strengths and Limitations of Reasoning Models via the Lens of Problem Complexity. And this got a lot of pickup, I guess, from let's say, the AI skeptic brigade out on the internet, and it got a lot of noise. And look, I've read part of the paper. What it's basically talking about is that if you give an AI reasoning model problems of increasing computational complexity, so things like the Towers of Hanoi or the river crossing type problems where you've got like a goat and a fox and a person, you have to cross a river together, these types of logic, computational logic puzzles, past a certain point, even if you give it more tokens, more ability to compute, it just kind of gives up and goes crazy and doesn't give the correct answer. And the strange conclusion from this is that it's just sort of fake reasoning. This is just like an extension of that, oh, it's just a statistical predicting the next word type of thing, right? And it's saying the ability of language reasoning models or large reasoning models to reason beyond a certain point breaks down. I have no doubt that's true. But once again, the same as the people who say, oh, it's just predicting, an LLM is just predicting the next token, it seems to be missing the point almost entirely, which is that these things clearly show behavior that looks like reasoning that is accurate for a large range of problems and can reason, to the point of my intro there, a lot better than a lot of humans. So sure, are there cognitive limitations in LLMs? Are they algorithmically perfect? Not even close. But then again, neither are humans. So I think there's this kind of weird straw manning happening, right? Where a paper like this compares AI to some weird idealized reasoning machine, says that it falls short, and just kind of leaves that conclusion hanging there that it's all a little bit of a head fake. And Chris, I don't know what you think, but I'm like, it feels like a defensive posture from humans, honestly, who are not comfortable with the implications of what's happening.
This sounds a lot like another study we talked about from Apple a number of months ago, where they also explored the limits of LLM reasoning. And in that one, they gave it unique problems or problems described in unique ways that resembled familiar problems, like the ones you listed, but they used different terminology and different framing. And the LLMs were dramatically worse when the problems were framed in unique and novel ways than if they were framed in the most familiar and common ways. And their conclusion was a lot of this is just basically memory, that the LLMs had scraped all of these problems off the web, it had learned the terms and the scenarios, and that it was just regurgitating what it had remembered. And so when you give it a version of the problem in different clothes, the LLM performance dropped dramatically. So this is at least two studies from Apple that are trying to show the limits of LLM reasoning. And, the question to my mind is why? Why is Apple so interested in disproving the reasoning capabilities of LLMs? We can speculate. Maybe just the researchers are fascinated by this problem and then exploring the frontier of the domain. I also think it maybe has a little bit of corporate bias. They're trying to show that, hey, we're not actually that far behind, or hey, this tech is not actually as magical as you think it is, or hey, we need to understand what this really can do in order to build the high bar of quality that we think we need to build. I don't know if there's a direct link between their commercial imperative and their research imperatives, but it is interesting. It strikes me as interesting as Apple keeps shouting or at least talking about documenting the limits of these tools. It does seem like an interesting phenomena.
I agree, it's fascinating, and we'll come back to that in a moment. But the thing, and you mentioned that if you create a problem that is similar to a well-known problem, that the AI will get confused by that. But then, what I think about all these is, so would a human. Humans take all sorts of cognitive shortcuts. There's a very famous book, Thinking Fast and Slow, by Daniel Kahneman, right? And it talks all about the fact that we have, system one and system two thinking, and that a lot of the time when we think, we're not engaged in deep cognitive reasoning. We're engaged in a type of rapid pattern matching. And, there are whole books filled with human cognitive biases. And so when I see that these models have some of the same cognitive biases or take some of the same shortcuts as humans, that doesn't make me feel like we're further away from AGI. It makes me feel like, in a sense, that we're closer, right? That our ability to mimic some of the ways that humans think is actually quite well modeled in here. And, if a human in 2025 wants to solve a really complex computational problem, they don't try to work it out in their heads. They would write a short Python script to solve it for them. And you know what? Large reasoning models are very good at writing short Python scripts. So this is a completely artificial problem where they're saying you don't get to write code that is actually good at algorithms. You just need to somehow do it in your head. And then when you make a mistake, we write a paper about it.
I think what's happening is that we, as users of this software, and this software, are both wanting it to be human-like in its behaviors and intelligence and its ability to pass a Turing test, but we want it to be, traditional software-like in the sense that it has perfect memory, we want it to have perfect reasoning, and we want it to have deterministic outcomes. It's sort of, we want to have our cake and eat it too. And what you're saying is this is intelligence, it's not software. And it's going to have all of the fallibility of intelligence, biological intelligence. I guess what we're looking for is super intelligence. We're looking for intelligence that is better than us, that does marry these two characteristics, the perfection of software and the reasoning of humanity. And we're not there yet. We're not there. We don't have super intelligence. We don't have general intelligence. We have the old Nokia brick phones versions of this. We haven't even seen the iPhone of AI. And so, there's a long way to go.
All right, so those are our thoughts on Apple's latest paper on AI reasoning. We'd love to hear from you in the comments. Do you think that this paper basically shoots a giant hole in the idea that we're approaching artificial general intelligence, or is it a big nothing burger?